Hi, welcome to the Hot Ball with me, Eamon Fennell, courtesy of AIG and Dublin GAA. On this episode, you're in for a real treat. We have John, Coach Kavanagh, who comes on to share some of his insights about how to train, how to prepare, discipline towards achieving what you want to achieve, and a whole lot more stuff. I got a lot out of it personally, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it too. Here we go. John, welcome to the Hot Ball with AIG and Dublin GAA. Look, I want to thank you for coming on. I know you're busy with a lot of things at the moment, trying to get your gym open again. So, how first and foremost, before we kick into things, how are you going with that? Is things coming along nice and smooth, or loads of
Yeah.
headaches?
Well, first of all, thank you much. It's a great honor to be invited on here to speak with yourself. The last few months have definitely been trying. I've been trying to keep in touch with the team, and the guys that sign up to do MMA fights, the part of the training they enjoy is the MMA fighting and the grappling and boxing and close quarter stuff, partner stuff. And the last couple of months have been training alone and running up and down mountains, which they don't particularly enjoy doing. But sure, look, we all had to do things, and we're almost on the other end of it. I've kind of eased them back in the last couple of weeks. We've started doing some partner drills and solo drills, and then we're back to kind of full training on the 20th. So yeah, we're almost there, and I'm looking forward to getting back to proper training.
But like with the return to play for GAA coming back now, and when you look at the stats around increase of injuries with return to play, like I know from a GAA point of view, club championship is kicking off now. The NFL, NBA, obviously the soccer's back. MMA didn't really seem to stop; it just seemed to continue in a different format. But with your athletes, the risk of injury must be a million times higher now with just the sheer level of contact within the sport.
Yeah, I actually shared a tweet there from a surgeon in the Santry Sports Clinic, which we all have to visit at some stage during our career.
I have, I have a
He was
like,
saying,
I have a coupon card for
you have a
there.
loyalty card, do you?
Yeah.
4 surgeries and the 5th one is free.
Not
Um,
far off it.
but yeah, I see he tweeted there only last week saying he's already at the scene a rise in ACL surgeries, and sports were literally back like 1 week, and he'd already done a bunch with them. So I'd shared that with my own team to say, look, you've got to respect your body, respect the fact that even if you have kept up, solo fitness training, that's a hell of a lot different than being hit from the side, being hit from funny angles. You guys turning on a dime, being able to change direction, and being able to put power into different areas. So with my fighters, we're going from, like I said, kind of running up and down mountains to having a guy tackle your leg or throw you on your head, or you're trying to push off from weird angles. So I've been strict with them on a many minutes of live training we do, like full-on resistance training, that we're easing back into that. And it's mostly I'm sticking with predictable type drills where you and your partner know what each other's going to do. Again, not the most exciting part. The exciting part is when you're boxing someone, you don't know what's coming, and you're trying to hit him and he's trying to hit you. But there's just too many things that can go wrong with that type of training if you're kind of the proprioceptors and the muscles are not firing the right way. And like I warned my guys, and then I shared that tweet from that orthopedic surgeon. So I'm hoping they will listen a little bit to me.
Well, I suppose the biggest muscle out of it all is the ego, like trying to park the ego about, like, when you get into the ring, like you can do it, but you put yourself at just such a high risk. And even from a GAA point of view, like when we step onto the pitch and someone throws a football, you naturally just want to get straight into playing games. But like even from our point of view, I've seen a lot of people just, and I'm guilty of it myself, by the way, I can put my hand in the air. We're coming back just too soon and trying to get to the levels we wanted to. And when you've been out of it for so long, you think you're so far off the pace, but you forget probably everyone else is at the same level that you're at. So this is my shout out to everyone. Just be careful when they're coming back into play. But it's good to hear that the gym's opening back up, though.
Yeah, next Monday. There's some changes have to be made, but sure, look, kind of like what you said there, we're all in the same boat. Everybody's coming back. We all have to accept the new norm. You know, it's not waiting for things to go back to how they were. It's like this is how things are now, and this is how we deal with them, and we continue to follow the directions handed down by our dear leaders, and just get back to doing what we can as much as we can.
Well, I think the positive thing is at least all your athletes will have loads of energy because we've all been carb loading for the last 4 months now anyway. So I'm kind of preparing for this without really knowing.
Lots of carbs, yeah.
I know your link with the GAA really came through just your background in MMA with training Kieran McGeeney. With the likes of McGeeney, he's such an athlete. Like, you know, he's just so disciplined in terms of preparation. He's so disciplined in terms of his approach to matches, to games. And I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to kind of witness that at a really macro level. But I suppose having trained with him and having seen him come up through the years, how have you seen now that correlate into other GAA players? Has it been McGeeney that's kicked off your love for GAA, or has it been the likes of with Philly, the work you're doing with them, or where has that all stemmed from?
Yeah, it definitely came from Kieran to begin with. I got very lucky that I met him. It's around about 10 years ago, and it was kind of at the same time that a bunch of fighters that I had, and Connor's an obvious one. He would have been 20 or 21, and he was just starting to get to a good, very high national level, and we were kind of on the brink of starting to go to the European level, and then obviously world level. And I met Kieran, and I had no background in sports science, or coaching at any kind of high level. I was a bit of a nerd at engineering, and that's where I came from. So I was able to lean on him a lot in the early days about structuring training and his his mindset. It's always funny when I meet a GAA guy, and I mentioned that I know Kieran. They all have a bit of a hushed reverence for him, and they all have a Kieran story. Oh, there was this time, or did you hear about this time?
Yeah.
And when my first meeting with him was, he booked a private lesson with me, and I had no idea who it was. And I walked in the gym, and a few guys are kind of elbowing me and going, "You know who that is? You're going to train with now, don't you?" And I was, "No, I didn't." Well, I knew by the end of that hour. Trust me on that. I kind of have a bit of a drill I do that makes people usually get tiresome quite quickly if they're not used to it, even though they might be fit in other areas. But it's a kind of a wrestling drill that I know how to cheat on, but other people don't if they don't know how to do it. So they're usually very inefficient at it. And you'll blow a gasket in 5 minutes, 6 minutes. I did it with him for just under 40 minutes, and then I said, "Okay, I'm done. I'm calling it." And we very quickly just started training. I basically trained him pretty much every day from that day on for the last decade, and I certainly got a huge amount out of him. It was between him and then a very good strength and conditioning guy called Owen Lacey from the Irish Strength Institute, and they sort of changed their whole approach to proper, like, again, phasing training. If you have a fight in 12 weeks time, it's breaking that into 3-4 week blocks, and not peaking too early, and not overtraining, and proper nutrition, and all of those things were kind of alien to us like 10 years ago when we kind of began our international run. So very, very lucky to meet Kieran and Owen Lacey of the Irish Strength Institute. And it just came at the right time. It was one of those things I was just very lucky with.
And getting involved then with Dublin GAA, kind of that sparked later on. You were obviously so disciplined towards your goals and your ambitions and focusing on your sport. But when you're around people like Kieran and you see the success he's had, I'd imagine it just kind of rubs off you to kind of see a bit more about the sport in general, and how people prepare for it. And you were kind of telling me that you jumped on the bandwagon at just the perfect time with Dublin GAA.
I like to think I maybe kind of started that whole run.
Take the credit.
It was actually funny. it was kind of funny because my first time going to like a big game in not my first Dublin game, but it was a biggish game, and I went with Kieran. And at that time, we were kind of getting known around Dublin, you know, like Connor was winning a few kind of national titles, and a few of my guys were starting to do well, and the odd person would stop me and be like, "Oh, you know, good luck with the team" or whatnot. And then I went to a big game with Kieran McGeeney, and I got to see what an actual famous person what it's like to be around the real, you know, people were dropping onto one knee and tipping the hat, and I was like, oh my God, this scene is huge here. You know, there was 10,000s of people at the games, and it was a real shock to me because we were still coming from venues with 500 people or 1,000 people, and then suddenly you're walking into a park with 20,000, 50,000, 70,000. It was a real eye opener for me. And then my incredibly enough, my first ever Dublin game was number one of the 5 in a row series. It was actually Kieran got me tickets. Me and my dad went along, and again, that was such an eye opener for me to go in there. The volume of the crowd and the passion of the fans, the passion of the players, and I've been very, very lucky that I've managed to go to the 5 in a row. So
So the trick is we need to get you a ticket for every All-Ireland final. Is basically,
unfortunately, that does seem to be the winning formula. So yep, you got to keep them coming.
Look, I'll take that up with Mossy and AIG and see what we can do.
I appreciate that.
I'm sure there's a few strings
Me
somewhere.
and the 20,000 other people harassing you guys for tickets on game day.
Yeah, well, look, I'm sure if anyone knows about the joys of trying to get tickets for big games, big fights, it's you. So.
I've gotten a few texts in my day.
But it's really interesting to hear when I talk to people like Philly McMahon, who had a natural love for the sport, and I trained with Philly for a good bit, especially during the winter. And I remember when I used to rock down to. He had the gym in Ballymun GAA club up in the attic, which isn't the most glamorous place to train. But when you used to go in on a Monday morning in November or December at 6 or 5 a.m. and see the mats on the floor, you'd go, oh, no, he's going to kill me. But in terms of, as you spoke about, your fitness, and I actually think it's really good to do something other than just the sport you're in. Like I've obviously with my background, having been suspended for a year, I played soccer, I went into calisthenics, I did a few different kind of events and exercises and training programs just to kind of mix things up. But I'm sure you've seen a bit of a, you know, in the winter months when the seasons are quiet, some like GAA lads or soccer lads or whatever, just other sports trying to get involved in MMA, just to, one, see it, but two, to do something different from what they're used to then as well.
Yeah, we will keep this conversation between us. But what's happened over this period is about once every 3 months or so, Kieran would march in a player. And it might have been when he was with Kildare or with Armagh, or sometimes like just someone from Cork team. And I don't know how Kieran convinces them to come up, but he'll say to them, "Oh, you know, come along for an introductory lesson." But he'll bring the guy along to one of my like advanced classes where it's all very experienced guys. And I'd be saying to Kieran, the guy's kind of learn a few of the basics for it. Kieran, no, I'd be fine. I'll partner with him. And it would just be like 90 minutes of Kieran trouncing this poor fella, and I don't know what he did to deserve it. And at the end, they were like, "Kieran, like, I don't know if he really learned that from that." And he's like, "No, he got what I wanted him to get out of this." And I was like, "Oh,
there's a life lesson in there." Yeah.
But no, I've done a fair bit. I've been very lucky that he's brought in some of the compromise rules teams, the Kildare team, Armagh, and then I've done a bit with the Masters with Peter Finn, the Dublin team, and I don't know what you call them, Masters or veterans or
no Masters, yeah, Masters. Yeah,
Masters, I'll take that.
I'm call them Masters too, but geriatrics when we're in the pub,
yeah. Very good. And it's always been a real pleasure. It's fun just teaching a group of guys that are very physically there, but they're doing something completely different. They're doing something completely new. And it's always my first kind of introduction is, look, you don't have to tense every muscle in your body doing every single movement today, but you will.
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of say to them, look, in some of these positions, you got to imagine you're waltzing with a girl. You don't break her back holding her so tight and your shoulders up and you're holding your breath. And I do think it's a very valuable lesson when you try to do something completely outside of your comfort zone and you see just how inefficient you are with your musculature, your breathing, your posture. And then you can take that, hopefully that kind of lesson comes away and you realize, well, maybe I'm 80% of the time good, but maybe 20% of the time, maybe sometimes I'm being held on the ground or I'm being held in a funny angle. And I do go into that state of tension. And it's those positions that tire people very, very quickly. And you can be as fit as hell. You can run all day long. But if you try to drive with your handbrake on and your brake on, well, it won't matter. You're still going to burn out the engine. And I'd have to actually say I've been very interested in watching the Dublin team because I think they do it better than anybody. And when I was getting into the game and I was starting to get a little bit of understanding of it, I always kind of found it funny. And I noticed there's one other sports team, the Patriots, that the real fans, you'd be down at the halfway mark and they'd all go, we always do that. And we'll get them in the second half. And sure enough, it seemed to always happen. And I believe that was down to being more efficient. So that in that last 25% of the game, the Patriots and the Dublin team, they both seem to have an extra gear available to them then. And I think it's a mistake that the other teams are looking at them going, okay, well then find out what their running schedule is. And we're going to mimic that. And that's what's going to get us to that level of ability in that final 25%. And I don't think it's nothing to do with that. I think if you gave just like a basic treadmill test, you probably, all the teams, all the counties teams are probably not that much of a difference. But I do think there's a mindset that you guys have that's almost unique amongst all the teams. And I got to see some of that in action while I was working with some of the different teams. And that I think it's a very interesting area for you guys to explore even more as time goes on.
Yeah, and like as you were talking, I've started getting into open water swimming, and I noticed for the first 50 meters my breathing's good, but then when a wave comes, it hits me, my breathing just goes out the window, and I tense up and I do everything I was told not to do. So yeah, there's little bits we can take from trying something new, but to bring that into the world of Dublin GAA, I remember listening to an interview that you spoke about the yin and the yang, and that you have to have the balance of being able to like physically prepare for something and getting the body right and going through a fight, and then to kind of step away and recover and make sure that you're getting into the right headspace to prepare yourself to go again. And if you look at, you pointed it out with Dublin GAA, they have this ability, like when they're thrown in different scenarios and different situations, to be able to adapt and move the ball around, move the players around, have different kind of game plans. If you were kind of preparing a team now at the moment to come up against Dublin, so no, you're no longer in the stand on All-Ireland final day, we're after putting you on the sideline next to McGeeney, how would you set them up to try and combat that Dublin approach of just being able to mix and match different kind of scenarios? Is it all mental or is it physical?
Well, look, I don't want to embarrass myself and try and give tactics in football, but I'll bring it back to my sport. So if we're preparing for a big contest, a bit of Sun Tzu here, that if you know yourself but you don't know your opponent, you win half the battles, and vice versa. So you've got to know what your opponent's strengths are, but you've also got to know what your own strengths and weaknesses are. And if you know your opponent and you know yourself, you'll never lose a battle. So there's definitely the technical side of things. And like I said, I won't embarrass myself trying to talk about the technical side of things of the game. But certainly, the biggest observation I made, and I'm only going to repeat myself here, is just the difference in that last 25%. So I'd be interested in doing some of the drills with the players when they're in that last 25%. So if we can kind of match the energy levels in a base, if you bring them out on the pitch and you get them to that state of mind where they're in their last 25% of energy, And then let's see, can you do the simple things right? Because that's what the difference is in fighting. Everybody's a tough guy for round one. Everybody on the planet is a tough guy for round one. And even from a technical point of view, everybody will bring their hands back to the right place, the shoulders up, chin down. Their punches will be correct. And then you look at them in round three, and they look like a guy outside Coppers on a Saturday night throwing haymakers. You know, the form goes out the window. I'm trying to use terminology that be understood by everybody.
Yeah. No, that works. That definitely works.
So, I guess what in my training, what I'm careful of doing is that I'll do a live training while the technique is sharp. And for some guys, they're going to be able to do that for 2 rounds. So for some guys, more than that. But once I see that the technique is starting to be done incorrectly, then I'll stop the live training, because you don't want to get into your the neural pathways, these wrong movement patterns. And fighters will work a certain way. Most of our fights are 3 rounds. They'll work in a very correct way round 1, round 2 less correct, and then round 3 is terrible. So we want to make sure that we get 3 first rounds out of them as best as we possibly can. And I think what happens is in the gym, they do a lot of 3-round simulation fights, and round 3 is usually poor, but they'll just work their way through it. Let's just get it done. And it's like, no, that's not the idea. The idea is that the fundamentals, it's the simple things that were done in round 1 correctly, bringing the hands back to the chin, proper stance, proper positioning, that is mimicked in round 3. So I guess my point is, if you're going into round 3 and you're unable to do that, stop the training. Stop the training. Instead, let's do a blowout with some, burpees or some Tabata or whatever. And when the breathing is back normal, when the training, when you're able to again do correct technique, then go back to live training. It's kind of like, if you're doing Olympic lifting, you don't do Olympic lifting for endurance work. Olympic lifting is so technical, and if you start doing that incorrectly, you're going to mess yourself up for a start. Speak to some CrossFit people, but you definitely don't want to be doing like cleans for cardio training. You want to pick a more simple exercise that the form is easier to maintain even when you're very tired. And MMA fighting and your sport, football, is so technical that you don't want to be trying to do technical things when you're in a very fatigued state, because you're starting to program your brain. Oh, okay, I'm feeling tired. Okay, well, that's when I drop my shoulders. That's when I swing the haymakers. No. Even when you're feeling that way, that's even more. It's even become more important now to do the simple things right. And even with my absolute novice white belt eye, I could see that in the Dublin games. You could almost set your stopwatch. I'd see, okay, we're in that last 25%. Now watch the other team start to do sloppy passes, not bend down in the right way to pick up the ball, not get into certain positions where they can score. It was bizarrely predictable to me. So I would, if I was to become a turncoat, I would watch your guys' last 15 minutes, last 10 minutes of your last 20 games, and just look at the amount of unforced errors that are made. As compared to other teams.
Well, actually, funny enough that you mentioned that, I'm actually reading a book now. It's called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, about like that fight or flight and creating habits that you kind of get into, like where you're on autopilot. Yes. And I remember taking it back to when I was with Dublin. We were failing towards the last few minutes of the game. So if you look at the 2008-2009 games, we got beat badly in Croke Park, actually made a show of, and it was the last 15-20 minutes where we faded. Fast forward to 2010, we lost in the last few minutes against Cork, and then 2011, Mickey Whelan, who was our coach, invested so much time at the end of training. So it was a nightmare because we never knew when training was going to end. So, usually it's play a game, that warm down, away you go. It would be play a game, then you do 20 sprints, then you do a tackle box, then you play a 5-minute game, then you might do a scenario situation, and you're like, oh my God, when are we going to get home? But what we didn't know was it was obviously leading us into it's never over. Like, you always have more in you. But what you're kind of saying now is, in that neuro-linguistic programming about creating habits, what you deem success is being able to do what you did in round one in round three. So, like, if I'm talking to a player now, and what I'm getting at is, if you can't do what you were doing in the first 15 minutes or first 20 minutes of a game, you need to assess your situation to be able to say, where am I slacking? Why am I kicking bad balls? Why am I doing all this? And then break it into that kind of, okay, what was I doing then? What do I need to do now? But the hard part for all that, John, is people's egos, because I'm sure when you're in a fight, it's a lot different anyway. You want to just, if you're starting to get tired, you're just going to throw these haymakers. But if you said to your athletes, what I quantify for success is being able to do what you did in round one, in round three, then the result will look after itself, but we need to get that right. So it's nearly taking the result away and just getting the stepping stones in place to get there, is it?
100%. So you're really nailing it there with the language, because I'm over the years I've realized that we should become system obsessed and not goal obsessed. And I think at the start, the result, the goals, they become everything. And the problem with achieving a goal is that sometimes you're left a little bit like, well, I don't really know what to do next. And I know a lot of people in our industry, in our world, they may do some consultation for, like, I'll say, civilians on weight loss. That's a huge one. I think half of the messages I get are from women saying, "Oh, I see your fighters lose tremendous amounts of weight in the lead up to a contest. My wedding's in 6 weeks' time. How do I lose 10 kilos?" And,
don't give out your answers, don't.
We've all been, anybody in the sort of fitness industry has been pulled to one side at some stage and being asked, how do I lose 10 kilos? And that to me is a goal-orientated question. Okay, so in 6 weeks' time, you're going to hit, if you're 65 kilos now, you're going to be 55 kilos. You step on the scales, bang, you're 55 kilos. Boom, I made my goal. What's that person going to weigh 1 week from now? 65 kilos. Yeah. They're going to put it back on like that. And that's because they're goal-orientated rather than system-orientated. So if you instead put a system in place, and your system might be, well, look, I'm just going to have a good breakfast. I'm going to just make sure that I have the same breakfast every morning, or the same kind of type of breakfast every morning. And this is what I normally tell girls, is like, just have a good breakfast and then eat whatever you want for the rest of the day. Now, it's a bit of a psychological trick, because if you can get them to have something really healthy in the morning, it sort of sets them up for the rest of the day that, maybe they won't have a Snickers for lunch, that instead they're going to have, a sandwich, and maybe that instead of the Coke, it's a bottle of water. They'll start doing those things themselves. So guess what? They may not lose the 10 kilos in a 6-week period, but it's going to gradually come off, and they're going to be in a certain shape for the rest of their life, rather than just goal orientated. So if we bring that back to our sport, I definitely have fighters coming in and they have a mentality of just like, okay, I'm going to just tip along in the gym, and then when I get a fight announced, I'm fighting in 8 weeks' time. Okay, now the revs go up. Now I go up the gears. Now every training session is super intense. And those guys, I would call them goal-orientated fighters, they're never really going to get somewhere. Whereas a system-orientated fighter, that they have a 12-month program, and yes, there is going to be 3 or 4 peaks throughout the year, depending on where they are in their professional career. We kind of know the dates in advance. And they're going to do that for a 10-year period. That's somebody that you can sit down and say, okay, that's going to be our system for this decade. There's basically a 10 or 15-year window for them to make it in this game. And that's got to be the approach. And that comes down to a micro level when we're looking at individual games, individual fights, that it's not going to be like, put this guy away in a round. No, it's going to be, you're going to do these 3 things in the kickboxing range, in the clinch range, in the ground range. We've assessed your opponent, we've assessed your skills. So every time we're in one of those 3 ranges, we will implement this strategy, this system, and you'll just do that. And the fight might be 1 minute long, it might be 15 minutes long. If it's a championship fight, it might be 25 minutes long. If you're playing a game, it's the length of the game. It's not, I go bananas for these 10 minutes and we get a great, we're way ahead on the scoreboard. It's a game. You've got to have that system, employ it. And it was, what you were saying there was funny, because this is something that me and Kieran will talk about a lot. And there was a very famous wrestling coach. His name was Dan Gable. And he would sit in the stands, and he would kind of just ignore the guys, and he would just keep lining them up for sprints. And eventually some of them would start saying, it's nearly midnight here. When's it ending? And he would have a box of apples with him at every training session. And he would just start throwing apple butts at them if any of them started to kind of question what he was doing. And me and Kieran, we would be texting each other about, he'd have run into a situation on the pitch, or I'd have run into a situation in the octagon. And we'd say, "Oh, did you start throwing the apple butts?" Because it was basically getting through that sort of mindset of you try your best. And that's that encompasses a lot, saying try your best, but we try our best for the entire game, season, career. And then the individual goals, the individual results will take care of themselves.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of breaking it down to being system orientated rather than goal orientated. Actually, I like that as a summary in terms of building people up and trying to get them to buy into a program. Like, we all know what the goal is. The goal is easy, but the journey and how you're going to get there is obviously the crucial component to making that all happen. And I'm reading a book at the moment, another book. I have loads of time during lockdown, but it's Ross Edgley. I don't know if you've ever come across Ross Edgley. He swam around Great Britain 156 days at sea, 12 hours a day, and what he was kind of saying is how he prepared to swim around Great Britain was just, he broke it down to just making sure that his shoulders were bulletproof, that his body was able to take the impact of the waves. He's a 5'9" human being. He's not like a channel swimmer who's naturally big and a bit more fluid in the sea. But what he was getting at is that he prepared himself so well for just repetition, knowing what was ahead of him. So when he came to it, he was just in autopilot. And when you're staring down to the abyss, I'm sure them thoughts that crop into your head, you need to have a lot of mental strength. But this is what I'm getting at now, is what he said in terms of, he got to certain points where the waves, there was a tide or there was a black hole that he had to go through. There was jellyfish infestation up ahead. The communication from the support boat was always just very clear and very direct. It was just two things. You just have to swim fast, or that was his approach. Do you see that with athletes when they're starting to tire, that you can't get your message across to them being a coach? Like, you're trying to get them to do it, like they're in a situation, they need to come out of it, but they can't retain this information that you're trying to take because their body's under so much stress. What is your communication to them? Because we're talking about players being gassed at the last few minutes. What would you be saying to your athletes in them situations?
Yeah, great question. So I'm a great believer in familiarity. If you're familiar with that feeling, the lungs on fire, and then you're also being forced to think. So I'll do stupid things like, when I'm in the gym and I'm putting them through a simulation contest, and they're coming back after the third round, and their vision's starting to go, that because they're so tired, I'll ask them, "What's your niece's name again? When's her birthday?" And it's basically just like, because I sometimes say that MMA is like trying to play chess while being punched repeatedly in the face. You're trying to think of a move, but someone's smacking you.
Yeah.
But I will remind them. I'll constantly, like, I just had a team session there today, and we're going into that last round. And, we have basically, it's 5 minutes action and then 1 minute rest. And in the gym environment, I'll always do 5 rounds with them, even though the contests are 3 rounds. So I get like 4 1-minute blocks that I can speak to them. So once the round is over, and if you can imagine a gym with like 20, physical fit lads, and they're going at it, and then beep, round 1 ends, and I usually have music going, so I'll cut the music and just let everybody listen. you know, they can kind of hear that. And then I'll say, okay, and breathe. And everybody, okay, so what went well during that round? And what can we improve on? And, you know, they think about, okay, well, I did well with my front headlock position. My head movement could have been better. Okay, 30 seconds to go. Another deep breath. Okay, so we're going to start off the next round. Whatever you've been doing well, that's what you're going to impose in the first 30 seconds. You might still need to catch your breath. So the first 30 seconds, go to safe positions. You know, we might have some, because I tell guys, you don't have to be, you're not going to have your foot to the floor for the 5 minutes.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
going to be burnt. So there's spots where you do learn to take a rest. You know, there's in a 5 minute round, you will learn to take a rest, but I don't learn to take a rest while you're a meter from me and you're swinging big haymakers. And I go, okay, well, chin up now and I'll catch my breath. No, I'd have to get in tight, put my head underneath your head, control the inside of your arms. And now I cheat. Now I take my breaths. Or if we're on the ground, I do a lot of grappling with Kieran McGeeney, and, you know, I'm never going to match him physically. So I have to trick him. I have to put him in positions where I just have a little, thankfully I still have a little bit of technique, a little bit of experience in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I can put him in areas where he'll just book and bronco for the whole time, and I'll sort of ride the storm. And then my energy comes back, and then I'm ready to attack again. So I guess I get my fighters used to. I like when they're doing their 5 minute round, I put on loud, annoying music, African drums or techno or whatever it is, because that's what they're going to hear during the 5 minutes of a contest. They don't have the luxury of hearing me during a round speak to them, although that's kind of happening at the moment, the UFC with no audience. It's a very weird set of circumstances. But in general, let's be ready for that All-Ireland final day where you can't even hear yourself think. So they will have that for that 5 minute period, and that's where we need simple systems. No, just in these positions, this is what I want you to do, and you repeatedly do them, no matter what your breathing is like, no matter what your level of muscular fatigue is like, no matter what your girlfriend said to you that morning, no matter what went wrong in that last play. You just implement those like a freaking robot until the end of the 5 minutes. When the 5 minutes is over, I have 60 seconds with you. You know I'm going to ask you to breathe a few times. You know I'm going to get you to calm your mind. I'm going to start speaking in a way you will hear me over crowds going nuts. Because I'm not going to match the energy of the crowd, because that was already too much for you. And I see that with novice coaches, that they speak at the same level of the crowd. Instead of enunciating, speaking clearly, and using the same language and tempo that they've heard from me during the 8-week build up to that contest. Wow. And all of a sudden now, everything around them goes quiet and you can hear. And like you said, what am I going to say in between? Am I going to start teaching them techniques? If I'm teaching you how to block a punch in between rounds in the fight, we screwed up. You're probably in trouble here. You're probably going to get your ass whooped. Yeah. Maybe there's just something you're not spotting, that he's continuously switching stance and then throwing a lead hook. And it's cut you twice. So when he switches stances, you throw straight right and you keep your left hand up. Yes, you can hear that. Yes, you can hear that. Okay, deep breath, sip of water, mouthpiece in, and go out and execute that, plus what we've already done for the next 5 minutes. I'll see you in 5 minutes' time. High five, off you go.
That's simple, huh?
That's simple. And it's got to be that simple.
Yeah, no, but I do, even from being on a pitch in Croker and there's 80,000 people and you can't, like, I can't hear what the goalkeeper is trying to say to me, but like gestures that come in, like, you know, about hand on the crest means something, or like, you know, on the wrist, whatever, might just triggers that go into your mind. But a lot of things that we've discussed now, it's about discipline. It's about like you having discipline about your training, becoming very systematic in your approach and how you prepare yourself. It's about having discipline to know when you're starting to fatigue, you're starting to give up, that your body's saying, okay, now I need to get back to doing the basics right and getting back in. It's your discipline in terms of your communication. Like, you know, you can't just, I'm sure you want to say a million things in that 1 minute window that you have, but it's not. It's about, you know, players and fighters have to come up with the answers themselves and understand and have the headspace to be able to do that. If you look at the current Dublin team, where I think one of their biggest strengths are, it's actually their discipline in terms of
Absolutely.
how opposition set up against them. Will go mass defense, or they'll target like Darren McConnelly, or they'll target Kieran McGeeney, or they'll try and get Philly roiled up, and which usually works. But like
That's kind of easy done.
yeah. So like
Not Philly, but it's easy to rile up.
so easy, so easy. He'll probably give out to me now after he sees this. But that discipline, to create when it come up to something, so that fight or flight moment when suddenly you see an opposition do something that is just really negative. You're disciplined to know that you've trained a certain way to get yourself ready, that you mightn't break them down in the next 5 minutes, but over the next 10 minutes, you'll start breaking down that mass defense. Is that something that you look for as the biggest attribute and biggest skill from your athletes, is being able to be disciplined in every aspect of what they're doing and not get carried away with, wanting to go in the beer, wanting to chase, like, girls or boys or whatever it is, like, that you're disciplined to the craft and the process?
Yeah, so a few things in there. I guess this is not going to sound very friendly, not very nice.
Go on, yeah.
You've got so many fighters that are incredibly disciplined and show up every day and put so much energy in, that's enough for me. So let's say, and this, I'm sure this is just normal. Like, I've got, actually at last count, I've 87 fighters on my team, which is a little bit insane. At one stage, like at that 10 years ago, when Kieran started with me, I had 6. So I've gone from 6 fighters I've looked after to 87 fighters. So when you start getting into those type of numbers, guess what? If you skip a week's training, I don't have the time to chase you. I don't have the time to be knocking on your door. It's you that's going to have to step in the cage, not me. And if you want me in your corner, well, I will have to have seen you being in the gym. Because otherwise, why am I there? Am I there? I'm a freaking cheerleader. It's a very sacred bond, I believe, between a coach and a fighter, a coach and a player. I think that's a very sacred bond, because we both have to have what I would call earned faith in each other. Because when you're in that last 25% of ability, and we've been speaking about this, everybody's a rock star for the first half of a game, the first half of a fight. Everybody's tough. It's that last 20%, that last 25%, where I might be giving you an instruction that you can barely even understand. You're in that level of fatigue, but you have to have enough faith in me that you trust me and you will execute it without thought. And I have to have enough faith in you as a fighter, player, whatever you want to say, athlete, that I've seen you do enough things in the gym that I know what I can tell you and what I can't tell you. And that's only earned from day in, day out for years and years and years. I really think I have to be with a fighter almost daily for 5 years before I start really getting an understanding of them.
Yeah.
And I noticed that I have some pros coming from different teams around the world. They've seen, a couple of my guys have pretty good success, and they walk in and, within 2 weeks they're saying, so let's get a fight now. We're good to go. I'm saying, I don't even know your surname yet. I don't know anything about you.
But I know your niece's birthday.
I need to see them. And I definitely know that. We need to be in a number of situations in the gym, those last 25% type games, fights in the gym. I need to be in those with you repeatedly to learn how you react to those scenarios and how I'm best at communicating with you during those scenarios, because they're the difference. At the beginning in fighting, you can beat somebody just by being technically a lot better. And I know that sounds obvious, but if I get, like me now, I'm 43 and I'm in very bad shape altogether than what I was when I was 25. But still, give me a 25-year-old that doesn't know anything about my sport, and I can out-grapple them quite easily. It's not a endurance thing. It's not a physical thing. It's just purely technique. But when the technique starts getting similar, if you look at the early championship rounds versus the All-Ireland final, it's not like you guys know a way of kicking the ball that they don't know. There's no big technical difference between the best and the second best. And that's the same in fighting. It's not that there's a massive difference in the technical ability between the guy who wins the belt and the guy who, gave him a really good fight but just fell short. I think it will come down to, most of the time, having that discipline in the last 20%. And I don't think you can give that to someone. I don't think you can force somebody to do that. I am completely against the idea of willpower. I'm completely against the idea of motivating. I've never been able to motivate somebody to do something they didn't want to do for any meaningful length of time. Yes, I might motivate someone to go to the gym once or twice. I give them a Rocky speech and you can do it, kid, and all that. But I can't do that every day for 5 years so we can get some kind of meaningful improvement in skill and create a meaningful bond between the two of us. I can't do that. I don't have that amount of Rocky speeches in me. I just don't have the energy for it, to be honest. That is the player's responsibility. And, we both have to have our responsibilities. I have a responsibility as a coach. I got to show up every day without a hangover. I got to show up on time. I got to make sure the mats are clean. I got to make sure you've got good training partners. I got to make sure the environment in the gym is right. So I'll hold my hand up if I fail on any of them. And you, as the player, you have to have responsibilities that you've got to show up every session. Every session has to be meaningful, because practice doesn't make perfect. Purposeful practice makes perfect.
I love it.
You know what I'm saying? You've got to, it's on your responsibility that at the end of the week, you have made that 1% improvement. And then if I pull you aside and say, well, what did you work on this week? And I regularly do that to my fighters, like, okay, it's Friday now. We did a good week's training there. Show me 2 things that you either learned that were new, or 2 things you already knew but we improved on. And at the start, they're kind of scratching their head and I say, okay, you just wasted a week's training. See you next Friday. There should be answers to that. Otherwise, what's the point? I'm working with a new, he's been with me before, but I've got a fighter now, and we're just starting a 10-week training camp. And he has a big fight in September. And I've sent him, actually, that's why I was a little bit late jumping on the call there. My apologies. I was sending him a bunch of video clips from his last couple of contests. And it's the same 2 or 3 errors that he keeps repeating. And I'm sending him them now. So I know in 10 weeks' time, I'm going to show them again, and he's going to be embarrassed by them because they're going to be so elementary to him at that stage. He's going to wonder, why in the hell did I ever make that mistake? And I feel like kind of I'm going off on a tangent here.
No. Like I've been taking notes on a personal level, whatever, about the show. But I love that idea of earned faith and trusting what it is you're being told and what you're like trying to achieve. We all have our own ambitions and goals, but unless you have someone who's bought into it and is on the journey with you, you're never going to get to where you want to be. Well, you're never going to sustain what you want to sustain. We can all achieve goals, but it's that system approach to sustaining that, and how you get that is by purposeful practice, and that was what makes you perfect. You weren't going off on a tangent. I loved that I was writing notes down myself, that I'll use in my Rocky speeches. Actually, speaking of rock, last time I met you was at the Guns N' Roses gig in Slane.
Oh.
Yeah. I won't get into that in the call, but it was a great night.
I remember that when we used to stand in crowds.
It was a shame about the weather, but it was a good night.
Yes, it was.
Slaying gigs anyway. But where do I want to kind of where do I want to kind of finish with this, because time is getting away from us, is everything that you're speaking about now is about that kind of shared vision, about if you're trying to achieve someone, be it on an individual level or a team collective, you have to have someone with you on the journey, and they have to be bought into what you're doing. And is part of your role is, when a fighter comes to you and says, I want to win a title, or I want to beat this guy, do you create that vision with him on how that's going to be, or does he have that and then you just kind of put the building blocks in place? Or how does that work? Because I'm just fascinated on a personal level to know how you can bring one fighter to a place, but then you bring another fighter to the whole heap of awards and a whole heap of accolades, like just what the difference is in that.
Well, I certainly asked them directly, and that's usually an interesting response, just to say, well, what are your goals? And don't be afraid of saying them. You know, because some of them might sheepishly say, well, get UFC one day, you know. No, what? Say that again. You want to be in the UFC? Oh, and do you want to just go there and do a couple of fights? Well, you know, maybe be a champion one day. I said, well, okay, say it loud, say it proud, and then I'll say to them, okay, well, I have done that with somebody, so I can show you a journey. I can map it out for you, but now there's going to be accountability in there. And when you skip that session because it was your girlfriend's birthday, I can say, well, if you know, it's kind of that NLP thing. You can look at how a champion has been during a 5-year period, and I'm not saying it would always work, but if you match what they did, you're certainly closer to getting towards that goal, and I don't really like using those words, but anyway, than by not doing that. And I will keep people accountable to what they say. Now, some might come in and say, look, I want to just get in decent shape, and I'd like to do a fight at some stage. It's kind of a bucket list thing. Fine, that's no problem. We have a pathway for that, and you know, I'll give you some markers you should hit, and I'm going to make you accountable for that. And when we chat at the end of the week or at the end of the month, did you hit those markers? Did you make that number of sessions? And it's very obvious who is saying things and then who actually wants to go there.
John, sorry for cutting across, you know, when that person comes in, and I'd imagine there's a lot of people like that come in and say, oh, I just kind of want to lose a bit of weight, or I want to get in shape, or whatever. Yeah, can you see the people where they have just a burning ambition that's not really why they're there? They're just saying that, but you know, like they want to get into the UFC. They just haven't got the confidence yet to do it. Do you see that in someone? Like, is that noticeable to you?
A little bit, and again, not to sound cruel, if they're not able to say it, they're probably not going to get there.
Yeah.
They must bring a little bit of that. Some will say arrogance. I will say self-belief.
Yeah, I was going to say self-belief.
You know, now we can very quickly, within, you know, a couple of months period, they can sit down with me and say, so what do you think, coach? Have I got it? And I go, well, you did 2 sessions in the last 2 weeks. So probably not, you know. And look, I'm never got falling out with them or anything. I'm saying, look, I'll be you know, I'm friends with some of these guys, and I might even go out and have a few beers with them and stuff like that. But I'll say, look, if we're being honest, you know, we're a coach-athlete relationship. No, you're not going to be a world champion. You're not going to get to that level, but you can still play and enjoy it. And I think it's important to say that, you know. And look, let's map out a 10-year plan for you to get maybe your black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This is what you need to do. But if you want to, you know, it'd be like someone like me coming to you and say, oh, do you think I could play in the All Irelands next year? You know, you're gonna go, well, not really, John. But I really want to. That's not enough. That's not enough. Now you might say to me, well, it's unlikely, but let me see you do this for the next 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and at 12 weeks you sit down with me, and I've shown you some skill improvement, I've shown you some commitment, and you're going, well, actually, okay, who knows? Maybe this might be a weird story because I gave you some markers to hit. You were accountable, and we were able to measure it at the end of a specified period of time. Okay, well, here's now the next 12 weeks. And I can certainly do that with my typical stories, a 20-year-old coming in, and he might have a good background in amateur boxing or wrestling or something. And yes, he's bold and he's ambitious and he has that confidence to say what his goals are. I give him, I feel I'm repeating myself here a little bit, but I basically give him a map to follow, and I keep him accountable. And the more he hits everything that we've agreed upon together, and he accepts his own responsibility, well, then the more I'm going to start giving him, and the more attention he starts getting. And guess what? You know, things start to happen then. But there definitely needs to be a lot of personal accountability if you want to be playing in that top 1% of the 1%. I've never met someone in the 1% of the 1% that wasn't self-driven, that you didn't have to tell them, you know, don't come in on Monday stinking of booze. I never met somebody that I had to do that with, that was going to get to the 1% of the 1%.
But do you think that approach, you know, to get people really bought into it, like, you know, if you said to someone, look, if you stick to this, you're going to get to the UFC, or if you say to someone, you know, to get them really bought into it, because I'm a firm believer in success breeds success. Like, you know, if you learn to put the disciplines in place that you have in your athletic performance, you have accountability in terms of, you know, it's a team environment, you don't want to let the team down. I think that benefits in other aspects, be it business or be it you know, your relationship or whatever it might be. But do you use that as a motivating factor for people as well, to say, look, let's come on this journey together. It's going to be 12 weeks or it's going to be 5 years. Just say 5 years. It's going to be 5 years. But I guarantee you at the end of that 5 years, not only will you be a better UFC fighter, it will help you towards your business goals. If you want to get into academics, whatever it might be, this will open up more doors for you. Have you ever kind of used that as a motivating factor, or is it solely just about fighting in general?
So look, 100%. So you started off this by saying success breeds success. And we hear that a lot, but it's actually incredibly important. So if I have a beginning fighter and I only allow him spar experienced pros, he's never going to experience success. So how can I get him? How can I keep that level of? I try to avoid words like motivation, but that level of enthusiasm for training when every day you show up. You might even be trying to do you might even be doing the technique correct, but you're going against someone whose processor is just working at a different speed to you because they've just been going for longer. They've been training for longer. It really is simple maths. So I think it's incredibly important that early on, I put them in situations I know they'll have success. So I'll put them with somebody who's much lighter than them maybe, or I'll put them in a specific scenario that I know that they're going to have a successful outcome. Okay, ready, and go. And 3 seconds later, boom, they're out of that particular hold. And their eyes widen and they go, wait a minute, what you told me to do worked. And I got success today. I got a moment of success today. And that, to me, is implementing a system rather than an end goal. Maybe the end goal is to be UFC world champion. But you can't on day one say, okay, well, let's get on to Dana White. Let's get that fight set up for next week. You're going to get destroyed. But what I can do is put a system in place that I'll try my best anyway, that every training session, especially if it's a training session where they're the focus of it, that they're going to get a lot of dopamine hits that day. They're going to get a lot of success. You know, I'm going to put them in scenarios that I know that they're going to have a positive outcome. So we're starting to get that system in place where kind of like do what we're told, we get a positive outcome. The trust is beginning to build. The system is beginning to be believed in. And these small successes that are happening daily lead to bigger successes happening at the end of the month with a spar against a guy that maybe at the beginning of the month you just could have no luck with it at all. Actually, just on that, I train a couple of female fighters, and one of them had a kind of a funny comment that she looked forward to competition so that she could have some success, because in the training environment at that time, she was the only female. And no matter how good she was doing the technique, a guy could just outmuscle her and then it wouldn't work. But when she went against a girl her own weight, suddenly she was like chucking her around like she was a doll, you know? And she was actually in competition. That was her only experience of success. So that took a certain mindset to be able to go through that 3-month desert of just failing and failing and failing, but failing up. That's a big thing I try to tell myself. We fail up to success. We don't fail down to quitting. And with each failure, and I even hate that word, we need to kind of change I think we're too obsessed with like everything is winning and losing. It's win or learn. You know, we're winning or learning. We're failing up towards success. And you can only kind of get that with somebody if they buy in early, to use your terminology. And how do we get them to buy in? Well, we can ask them, but I don't think that will work. Or we can prove it to them with micro successes early on, daily, weekly, monthly. And now the momentum is gone. Now the wheel is spinning. Now the trust is building. Now the system is in place. And I think the end results will kind of look after themselves then.
I've absorbed so much of what you said there, and it ties into a quote that I read, and I kind of get the impression that you're probably the biggest advocate of this. Is that in that book I'm reading with Ross Edgley, he said, "Fitness is a journey we should all go on, but no one should ever finish." It kind of sounds like that you're always willing to adapt, to learn. Like we can always, like there's a new technique, there's a new approach to how we adapt to situations, be it COVID-19, what we're doing with that, trying MMA out, like trying calisthenics, whatever it is. You can always learn from trying something different. And everything that you're kind of saying to me, I get that approach that you use like lessons, and I'm going to wrap up now because time is getting away from us, is like, but you use them lessons as really valuable learning tools, and bringing people on that journey is on self-discovery. It's not like you're not taking that authoritative approach of saying you need to do this, you need to do this. There's a learning journey, and they have to learn for themselves to be able to go into that situation, deal with that stress that their body's under, and come out of it themselves. Because again, at the end of the day, the accountability lies with you when you're in the ring, and it lies with any player when they're on the pitch as well. So yeah, I loved this conversation, John, and unfortunately I have to wrap it up, but I could talk to you again. I have about 10 more points here that I want to talk to you about, but I know, look, your gyms are opening back up. You have a baby on the way. Yeah. So, you're after giving me more than enough time. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I got a lot out of it. I'm sure any player or any athlete who watches or listens will get a lot out of it as well. So look, thank you for giving us your time today.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. And if you ever want to do it again, do it. Or if any players are watching this, they can shoot me slide into the DMs, as the kids say. And,
you're a bit old for sliding into DMs now.
I don't do any sliding. I stumble around the place. But if anybody would like to ask me any questions on any of the topics that we touched on, it's I came into following the team late, and I'll hold my hands up to that. But I'm a massive fan now. It's when you guys approached me to do this, I got such a rush that anybody would be interested in anything I have to say from such a successful team. So yeah, anything at all I could do would be a massive honor.
Well, you may regret saying that, and you could have a flood of messages in your DM. So anyway, look, I appreciate everything that you've done for all the people that have come to you in terms of the GAA, and obviously your time as well, which is a crucial thing at this moment in time with everything you're going through and everything we're all dealing with. So look, John, thank you.
Thank you, brother. Much appreciated. Very much enjoyed it.